Okay.
Recording in progress.
Oh. Oh, so we didn't record the introductions, right?
Right.
Okay, it doesn't matter, they know the plan. So the first item.
And Michael Vu, who was on
business.
Michelle Watch, he is in the room
I
here with us.
appreciate that.
I needed my steps in, Michelle.
Thank you. So our first item of business is the minutes.
Well, we are going to, let's see here.
First of all, do we even have?
We don't have a quorum,
Okay,
so we'll,
suspend the minutes unless anyone has any comments about it that they could make. If there's any concerns, comments? No, so we can suspend that till the next.
we've got non-agenda comment. So if there is anyone for non-agenda comment.
I might actually have something. Is there, I don't remember if we maintained on our agenda a section that talks about how other entities in the county are sometimes challenging to access now, post-COVID, because they're no longer even doing virtual. Is that still on our agenda or no?
There isn't an item to discuss that today, on today's agenda, but
That
we-
says what?
there is not
There's
an
not
item
one,
that
okay.
speaks to, now are you talking
That's fine,
other entities
Yes.
teleconferencing?
yes,
Yeah, that's
okay. So I'll bring it up under non-agenda comment and I will ask that we put that back on, because we hadn't kept it as a standing item. And then I think we took it off this month for the first time. So we can, look at that. But I ran into two situations. One was with High Tech High School that is now their board, and all this is under the Brown Act. They are requiring people to request public comment 24 hours in advance. That definitely makes it challenging. They had a hybrid meeting, but in order to do the public comment, you had to have put it in a day before. So I'm just bringing that up because these are just some of, I'd like us to kind of keep track of where it's being difficult to access civic discourse and participation. And the other one was is the Lemon Grove City Council, which also is not live streaming their meetings. You can listen to an audible recording later, but they're not live streaming it while it's happening, and there is no access for people who may be bedridden or don't have the ability to get there.
so they're only having their meeting in person.
In person.
Which is permitted.
Okay, but we're not trying to defend them, we're talking about access.
But I want to, right,
We're talking about access, they are making it hard for people to access that. And whether it's, we're not minimalists here, and especially on this committee. We have higher expectations of our government agencies, that they should be trying to get people to make it as easy as possible, not as difficult, and I only have to do the minimum of what the law requires me to do.
Right. Now that being the case, again, jurisdiction wise.
Again, I think this is an issue of conveying this to Caroline Smith, who's our Director of Economic Development and Intergovernmental Affairs, as she interfaces, whether it's through the state or through other government bodies that you're referring to, Michelle, to work with the committee and address any respective concerns should it be really the wishes of the board of supervisors on this, but understand the advice and advisory of how can we make access more inclusive for across all political jurisdictions and government entities within the region. So,
I appreciate that, because I don't wanna give them a pass just because they can get away with it.
Right, thank you. It's,
Our next
Either of those.
actual item,
any other non-agenda comments? So then, the next agenda item, Madam Chair, is accessibility support staff, and Michael Vu is here to present, the update for, support staff.
So just really quickly, I know that this has been something that internally that I've been talking with Todd on. I've talked with some of you as well as how can we, in the same breath as what Michelle was talking about, is how can we elevate our awareness and our actions related to not just access, but access particularly for persons with disabilities. As many of you know, we have our departments and all the different buildings that the county looks at. Our department DHROs or senior DHROs, if there's any concerns associated with the buildings themselves or individuals
what
being
is
able to access.
DHO?
I'm sorry, Senior Department of Human Resource Officers. So are responsible for from each of the respective departments to address any concerns associated with individuals accessing things like the building. And to take note of that and work with our Department of General Services. As I talk about that, the other aspect of this is just the overall education piece to this. And how can we ensure that the external side of it, as we look internally to the department itself and the buildings that we have and making it accessible, do we have an external person being able to interface? The closest that we have to that interface is Todd. So there is conversations that I've been having with Todd about how can we support that effort more when it comes down to this. I should mention, as we've been having that conversation, how can we look at adding a resource, a individual that is dedicated to ADA as a primary as opposed to a collateral, if you will, even though Todd's probably saying this is kind of primary for what I have over my domain, even though we hired him and we hired him for his expertise in privacy and PII data, personal identification, identifying information, personally identifying information, is why we brought Todd on, and he was asked to take on this role, and he's been doing a great job of understanding better of all the nuances associated with a person that lives with a form of disability or various forms of disabilities. And so that's kind of the conversation that we've had at this stage in time. There were some conversations around, is this the best place for the Office of Ethics and Compliance to house the domain under which we look at ADA and have that external interface, or is it better suited for another department or office? Let me just say that we just announced effective June 2nd that Brandon Butler, who is our director of the Office of Labor Standards and Enforcement, I just promoted him to the director of the Office of Ethics, Compliance, and Labor Standards. So if you know anything about the county and these two offices, is the Office of Labor Standards and Enforcement, as well as the Office of Ethics and Compliance, comes on under a director under the office, both of those two offices report to. So Brandon Butler has been, if you will, the sister or the partner office to the Office of Ethics and Compliance. He has now been elevated from the director's position of Office of Labor Standards and Enforcement to the director of both of those two offices. That will be done June 2nd, effective June 2nd. And I would have had him come here today. Of course, he's not on the agenda, but I would hope that he's on a future agenda. And the reason why that's important to speak about that is that his background, he used to work for the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. And some of his staff that reports directly with him, they have experience in the, not just the discriminations and that, but specifically over ADA. He's a trained attorney. Actually, he's got a couple of attorneys under his belt. So I think that will come into a lot more support in terms of understanding and addressing issues of disability within our county, and also how we can elevate the awareness and education, and not just about buildings themselves. I should also mention, if you look at the budget, we have passed a budget of $8.1 billion. And if you listen, because I know that we've had individuals from the public safety group, sheriff's department specifically, come and talk with you about accessibility in the detention centers. I don't want to speak for the sheriff on this, but I do know that the sheriff has put in her budget, I think it's a whole unit of ADA experts into the budget that the board will consider. This is the $8.1 billion budget. It's up for public comment right now, the budget. But that will occur certainly before June 30th, when the board needs to pass the budget before July 1st fiscal year budget begins. I don't see that as being an issue. I haven't heard that's not going to pass, so I'm pretty confident that the sheriff will get that. And I think she understands that from a number of different levels as what she, if you listened, and I would recommend that you, if you are interested in this conversation, that you listen to her comments when she came before the board to talk about her budget. I want to say the April 20th, but I could be wrong about that. May. Not May. We're in May now. It's April, I think it was. Or it was in May, I'm sorry. May 4th is when we, it was actually okay. So it's May 4th is when we released the budget. It was the following Monday. So I think that is what, the 10th?
Would you be by chance willing to send that out?
To the link, that would be great.
Yeah.
But what it was very interesting of what she said about this is that she needs the unit, and part of that is they're renovating a number of different detention centers. Rock Mountain is one of the detentions that she's has undergone a number of renovations. George Bailey too, but they haven't been able to finish up. They've been able to finish up Rock Mountain. However, they haven't been able to get it approved because they have to get it approved by the state first. And part of that is the ADA piece to this.
Where is Rock Mountain? I know where George Bailey is by the border.
It's in and around the same, it's like effectively the same area.
In the Mesa area?
So when she's putting that in, and it was interesting to see her describe the conflicts of trying to, first of all, the ADA laws in place conflicting with detention regulations around what needs to be, and them conflicting with one another, and she's trying to manage through all of that. So I thought it was fascinating, and probably doing a very poor job of describing what those specific things are, and I don't know what those specific things are, and nor was it described. I just thought it was fascinating that she's building towards a unit that can help guide the renovations of what will occur with other detention centers that they need to be renovated. And one of those is going to be the Vista Detention Center. I know that is one of the detention centers that is top of the list. And then also education too.
I have like a million questions and I don't want to be interrupting.
Yes.
So what would be the best way? Should I just store them and ask when you're finished, or?
This would be a perfect time to ask those questions, as I was pretty much through with that. I think, again, Todd will introduce Brandon to all of you,
Yeah.
and then he can really talk with you about kind of his vision of ADA as it relates to the committee itself and then to the county.
Thank you. That sounds like a really great person for the position. I know that the Civil Rights Department and the Department of Employment and Fair Housing, that's a tough one, that they are involved in a lot of mediations and settlements. So I think that attests to them having a good skill set for how to accommodate and how to find effective solutions. So I really appreciate that. Do you know if Kelly Martinez's new ADA team will be specifically corrections based or will it encompass also patrol and court services?
It was described to me as a whole unit, so I would think that they would have both. I don't want to speak for the sheriff, and so I think that would be a question that we can take back to the sheriff
Yeah,
as to
maybe.
what her vision is as to
Yeah.
the department itself.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that whoever the individual is that came probably added, as another push from this committee to do more when it comes down to making sure that the sheriff and all of the patrol and detention side are looking at through that lens as well.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know more about this unit, what, training or specific people involved, what they have as far as qualifications go. Like a better sheriff, person with disabilities.
Yeah, maybe after you send the link out, we could all take a look at her comments and then maybe we could have an opportunity to put a list of questions together.
Or any type of collaboration, really, you can join us in all of our meetings.
Yeah.
You can provide feedback, and vice versa.
The link specifically is what?
To the video of the board meeting where we had our
Oh, the board
budget
meeting.
hearings.
Kind of-
Michelle, I think you were there, right?
That's why I was trying to
Yeah.
place where it was. I was there for part of it.
Yeah. We'll send out the link and then at the future time, like I said, this is all new. She doesn't have it quite yet, but certainly as this thing grows legs and should pass, qualify that, then you can have someone from her staff, not her, answer some of the questions that you have around this, but I would formulate the definite questions. And I will if I see her, I'll let her know that we have this conversation.
Yeah, this is the first I've heard about a big budget pass for ADA staff or team or anything. So this could be incredible.
Did you have other quick questions?
Yeah, no, I'll just wait and
Okay.
put together a list. Very excited about that.
How much I heard you say the $8 billion budget, but that's countywide.
That's kind of like, yeah.
And how much, did you say a specific amount specifically for the sheriffs?
I don't know specifically with the sheriffs and specifically about the ADA unit, you can go back to the.
Yeah,
back and
because that
really
$8
find
billion
out,
was
but-
countywide
Yeah,
for everything.
right, so we
I
don't
would
know how
say
much money she's allotted.
I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I look at from the
I
bigger
know.
numbers, but I know like for the Health and Human Services Agency budget, they're sitting around about a $3.1 billion budget. And then of that 8.1, and then all of law enforcement, public safety side of it, which includes sheriffs, DA, public defenders, child support services, animal services, probation, is around a $2.8 billion budget. So as you can tell, those two entities, or what we call business groups, consume most of the $8.1 billion budget. And as you can imagine, sheriff has a big portion of the public safety of that nearly $3 billion.
What percent goes to like alternatives to incarceration and like mobile crisis response team or PERT or
Yeah, so
the mental health aspect?
the MCRT, well, let me just say the behavioral health space of the county is the largest. I call him the $1 billion man, Dr. Luke Bergman. So Dr. Luke Bergman, his department, which is Department of Behavioral Health and Services, he just crested over $1 billion in this budget first department, which is the largest department that runs things like MCRT, the mobile crisis response.
And is he on the behavioral health advisory board?
Uh,
That name sounds familiar.
Yes, he
Yeah.
is the person that is responsible for running everything within the behavioral health and would be part of the behavioral health advisory board.
Yeah. So how does it get determined, like, okay, so I guess there's bylaws, and I don't wanna get too off topic, but I am curious, so we don't really have a are you like the equivalent of our staff person as Luke would be to the behavioral health advisory board?
I don't know who staffs,
Oh, yeah,
the
Behavioral
advisory
health, yeah.
board on the VHS
Yeah.
advisory.
English.
board.
yeah,
Yes. And there's so many different acronyms.
I know.
I know that he participates at,
yeah,
but I don't think he runs it like
yeah,
Todd.
yeah.
Are you
does
looking
in
at your
terms of-
question, who's the executive sponsor for the
I
committee
just
for persons with
noticed,
disabilities?
well, I just noticed when I attended the behavioral health advisory board, which I'm very interested in because it is a disability conversation that's not being had. The conversations are based around mental health as a almost separate entity from the disability and disability rights conversation. So I'm really interested in our team, you know, in the future, when we work through some of our strategic plans, that we might partner a little bit more with them, but I found their structure really interesting. And I wasn't sure if I was experiencing what might be a conflict of interest with somebody that is the top of a particular department, or is behavioral health called a department?
Behavioral health is a department.
Yeah, okay, so somebody who runs a department also leading the conversation and you know, really weighing in on how the movement of the behavioral health board meetings go. And so I just wondered how that structure came to be and how is it different from how our structure came to be.
So there are for sure, I know that there are some of the county commissions that hold a seat specifically for a county employee that is in a position of actually making that work happen. And so I know that's on the family strengthening committee, et cetera. So that they specifically have a space for, I believe it's a social worker, don't quote me on it, but it's definitely somebody in the field.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if it is that, I hear your concern about the possible, you know, but that's probably they should be cognizant of not like taking over the conversation.
Yeah, I don't have any specific criticism, I just noticed that, you know, somebody who makes decisions is also somebody who is like, I think maybe the right word is moderating. We seem to have some type of moderation role again. I'm very fresh to it, I really am just learning for the first time, but I am excited to see our committee working a little bit closer with the Behavioral Health Advisory Board on really changing the narrative and applying the disability rights law into our mental health services.
I think that's a very great point about how the two are connected and not necessarily siloed. They shouldn't be necessarily siloed, but there should be an informed conversation when you're talking about just behavioral health and the person's well-being, mental well-being. Is that you gotta look at that from the perspective of their potential disability as well. So that's maybe something that I'll absolutely convey it to Dr. Berkman and then Todd as well. So we kind of sandwich this thing that's out there. Just to let you know, every board and committee and commission works a little bit differently. So you'll kind of see that they have their own little subcultures or culture in terms of how they run the respective operations, and certainly readjust is another way to do it. The other one is the human relations commission as well, where you kind of the chair and staff, but not the overall conversations. But that we have and kind of decisions that they do as well.
Yeah.
In a forum, the general public, and then talk with staff about what the next steps are. Budget and work closely with the chair. That on that side, it's also that racial justice, so that will be strong. But all of them work a little bit differently. There's so many of them.
Yeah.
Nearly 200 different.
200?
Nearly 200 boards, commissions, committees that are out there. Yeah. I probably have given you a lot more information than I think I had on the agenda. I was going to give you just kind of the overall resources, but I just wanted to make sure that you had a kind of some future insights as to decisions that have been made at the county, and letting you know about Brandon and some of the continued conversations we are having about how to best position the county when it comes down to ADA. And we will continue to have that as it relates to the budget, and then kind of move forward as well, and then anything else that you bring up from your perspective.
That's
With that-
definitely helpful.
Thank you. With that, I'm gonna extricate myself because I know that you've got other items on the agenda. And so I will leave you be before I consume all the air in the room.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you, Michael.
welcome to join us.
I'm actually at overlap of double book because I got a meeting downstairs as we talked about right now.
Thank you.
Dylan's meeting, but one of our GM. So
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for checking in.
Bye, Michael.
So the next item on the agenda is the Gov delivery email structure, and we've got Holly from Planning Development Services is on the call on the line.
Okay.
So we'll have Holly. Holly, I'm gonna pull up an email, a sample email, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I actually have one. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
hear you.
you sound fine.
Okay. Perfect. If you have one, that would be great. I also had one kind of ready to go to look at.
Okay, I can, let's see, as long as I get my glasses here. Let's see if I
I was actually gonna ask, can you just give me an idea of how many other things are on the agenda so I can kind of keep track of time?
There are.
The Gov delivery and
One
then,
second, hold on, let me go back.
or
Gov delivery, annual report, public safety and housing, progress topics, that's it.
thank you. But just so I had an idea on the time.
Okay,
Thank you, Holly.
Problem. Thank you.
let's see, I think this is,
Yep.
yes,
Yeah. So again, my name is Holly Cortell. I am a new public outreach specialist with the pod for PDS. So we are here.
could you tell us what pod is?
Yeah, we really try
Absolutely.
to use acronyms, so as you go through your presentation, please be cognizant of that.
Absolutely. So the pod is it stands for Policy, Outreach, and Data. And so our role is to, we're here, it's a new division, and we are here to sort of integrate those three things and to provide new way of thinking about things and new way of presenting information to the community for really robust engagement, and to sort of help redirect our efforts to make sure we're getting in where we need to get in and getting the kind of information and kind of feedback that we need to really help inform the projects that we work on. So today I am here to talk about a potential change to our emails, to our Gov deliveries, which is basically an e-blast. We call it an e-blast. It's just when we have a project happening, it goes out to, hundreds, sometimes thousands of people at a time saying, we're going to have a meeting, we're going to have an event with regard to this project. Here's some information on that. Here's how to show up. And so what we are looking at, if you scroll down a little bit, Todd, the issue that we are having right now, or the thing that we're addressing right now, is when the emails go out, it can be a lot of information contained in the email itself, and then we translate everything into the 8 threshold languages. And one of the things that we're finding is it's just a lot of scrolling for people, particularly if you if English is not your first language. You've got to go through and sort of find all of those, find the information presented in the language that you can read and understand. And so what they are wanting to do, what we are looking to do, is to replace all of those interpreted, all of those translations down below with a single, just a single kind of input, a graphic that says in your language, and it's just a click. They would click, it would take them to another screen where they would be able to use Google Translate to translate the message right there for them, so that they wouldn't have to do all of that scrolling down. So in thinking about this, we really wanted to make sure that we were getting it right, and we wanted to consider it from an accessibility lens, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't missing anything. We want to make sure that our communications go out and are easily read and easily accessed by as many people as possible. And so we just wanted to, part of my goal, beyond just kind of opening up a line of communication with you guys and introducing myself and letting you know that we're here, is to also let you know that we're thinking about, we want to broaden the way we think about things and make sure that we are I don't know if Todd, you have the language accessibility form, or if I can share my screen and just show you quickly.
Can stop share there and see if, are you able to share, or do I need to?
Let's see if I can do it. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the accessibility and language services graphic. And I think this was already approved. What you would have is just, instead of all of those languages that you'd have to scroll down, it would be just one of these graphics in there that would direct them to the language that they need. Our Gov deliveries are not going to be able to have the, can't think of the word, the QR code. But it would be a link taking them to another page with the translation. So that's the proposal, is to remove all of those translations in the body of the email and just direct them to a link in their language to make it easier to access. But we wanted to make sure we were considering all issues of accessibility, and we weren't overlooking anything. So that's the presentation that I have for you today, and I wanted to open it up to see if there was any issues or concerns that you guys think we might need to consider with regards to this.
So is there anyone, I have some comments, but if Jessica or Kino or Bridget?
I'm so sorry, it's hard for me to hear, I think because there's some distance there.
Go ahead, you were gonna say
Oh, I
something.
thought Jose was doing
No.
something.
Oh,
You go first.
Okay, I feel like a little bit confused about how it works from the point of the email. So how do they, in the new system, how do
So-
people find their language?
So in the new system, it would be below the English version would be one of these graphics. There's 6 here in different colors, but it would just be one of those graphics, and each of those where you see the hand, each of those is a link to.
Okay.
It's a link to a translation in the language, and I think each of them says in your language. So yeah, it would be a link.
But is it actually saying the language?
Yes, it says in your language in each of those little links.
I don't understand. In English, it says in your language?
You know, in each little oval that they can click on, it has
Each tablet.
It
sounds like a
means
pill.
in your language.
in the language.
Each of these
So,
click
you know,
boxes.
all the different languages are a different icon. And when you scroll on that icon, in the different languages, it says in your language.
As in here, in su idioma means in your language.
It was the way she was describing it.
Yeah, it basically shows somebody, click here if this is your language.
And then when you click it, it will take you. Now, Holly, does it take them to the website in their language, or doesn't it take them to the website in English and they'd have to select their language from the Google Translate? Which, how does that work?
That's correct. It would take them to the project page, and then they would have to then click into Google Translate in order to translate. So it would be an extra click, but what we were looking at is it would eliminate all of the scrolling. Also, one of the issues that we've had is that when project teams are putting these together, they don't always necessarily put the different translations in the same order. So if you get used to it, or you think, okay, well, I just have to scroll down so far and I'll recognize my language, that's not always the case. So by having this, by eliminating all of that scrolling, yes, it does bring up it's an extra click, but it would eliminate a lot of extra scrolling. So we were hoping that would, the extra click might be mitigated by less scrolling, but that's something that we wanted to kind of put out there and make sure we're thinking about this in the right way.
But it's only in 6 languages.
It's in 8 languages.
Okay, it just, again, none of that is something I'll be able to use, but I'm trying to picture it in the words that you're using, or just keeping it in English for me. You're saying in your language that supposedly is in French or in Spanish.
Correct. Yeah.
But you're saying of course, but that's not clear. And then you're saying it goes into Google Translate. I know Google Translate is in English unless it's automatically putting it into another language. And Google Translate, I know, does over 100 languages.
Yeah, so it would actually take it to the project page, and then on the project page, Google Translate is I think it's like on the right-hand side. You go into you have to click your language in Google Translate to get it to translate. But these are the 8 threshold languages that we've identified as being the majority of the people that we send out our emails, our e-blasts to speak these 8 threshold languages. And then of course, yes, once you go onto the project page, which you're able to do from English as well, you can use Google Translate to translate into a variety of languages.
Sounds cumbersome to me, but I don't know if other people.
Well, the one thing that I understand that it's assisting me, particularly for my disability, is if I get an email from the county, there is a huge amount of content that's not in English. And so my brain has to figure out what's in English, what isn't in English, focus in on the English, you know, and just even in the letters that come out from the county, you've got a little paragraph in English, then you have every other language and a whole bunch of pieces of paper. And for me with a brain injury, it's like, just so too much. I would rather just have the tiniest little piece of information so that I can just hone in on that. So by taking the content of the language content out and simplifying it to a drop-down link or a set of links that one could click to have the full experience in their language seems like a wonderful disability accessibility yes, thank you. And I'm curious if you guys did also approach these eGovs from a disability accessibility perspective as well as a language accessibility perspective.
Well, I think, Todd, you were involved in, or I think had approval on some of these, on this particular page of the new graphics, I believe. But I
Yes,
also
that was as far as the accessibility and language notice. So that was the purpose for this, is so that they'd be able to see the accessibility and language service notice in their language. So what you are, I wasn't aware that you were planning to use the notice as the opportunity to link over to the web, or to the letter or to the email on the web, and then let them, because these boxes here, the little the eight language boxes there, are for people to be able to read the accessibility and language services notice in their language, so that they'd be informed that disability related accommodations necessary, et cetera, that content is in their language. But I'm glad to speak with you all about how that can be dealt with. But I think Jessica may be talking about the accessibility of emails in general from a disability standpoint through Gov Delivery. And that's an item that hasn't been discussed.
That seems like a valuable discussion item. I mean, I get these emails, I'm signed up for all sorts of the county subscriptions, and it's very difficult for me. And there are, some features I can imagine. And sometimes being certified web accessible doesn't necessarily help me either. But one thing I could think of is just being able to click to grow the font. Because the small font size is really hard on a tablet or a cell phone. Maybe for someone with a visual disability to be able to hear it, hear the message. Those are just two things off the top of my head, but I would love for us to engage in how to improve the eGov messages from a disability accessibility standpoint.
Yes,
Yeah,
we have a lot of time for this.
Yeah, I don't mean today.
Yeah.
I just mean in the future.
Yeah, and sorry, I was just gonna
Oh,
say,
you kind of said that you wanted to just broach it, and I said that that's fine, that we can fit it in, but to me, it's evident that you did not talk to the disability community. So, what I mentioned to Todd was you've never had anything, I mean, the county itself, it's challenging because the clerk's office does not assumes that people have access to a computer to be able to make public comment. That you have to be able to sign up on the computer. For you, it would be helpful to have had a telephone number from the very beginning. That people had access to getting the information and have it recorded.
And then also having the person answering the phone have some training in how to assist people with various disabilities, especially various communication disabilities.
So,
and that's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, go ahead, I'm just saying that that's, the obvious. That not everybody has access to a computer to get the information. I don't have a problem with it changing the languages. I do feel that what you're describing is cumbersome. I'm actually on the committee for language accessibility for the register of voters, and I know that that's a real issue in voting. And I'm also sensitive and aware to what Jessica is talking about. So maybe there is a way of separating it that isn't challenging to someone that already doesn't speak English, and that the rest of their world has to be translated through English. But maybe there's a less cumbersome way that allows that. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I would not have kept that in the big picture, or put it in the big picture myself. And Regina or Jose?
Yeah, just a lot of logistics to go through. I would try to, I mean, this is one step forward, obviously, to make it more inclusive for people with, different languages and backgrounds. But as far as implementing, there would be a lot of resources, it's like opening a can of worms. Having an IT background, there would just be like, oh, because then you go down the path of like, well, maybe if there's like audio transcription, but then you have all these different languages, right? So, I mean, I would assume that someone with a disability, such as myself, when I get an email, I could have it read out to me, which it can, and it does, and it's not super hard to set up. But again, I'm pretty tech savvy, so it might be a different demographic in that case, but, you know, I think these are good steps moving forward as far as just, you know, at least broadening the language barrier, I think, or reducing it rather. But,
Holly, did you have anything to speak to those, reaching those populations that don't have access to email or computers?
I don't at this time, but I did want to say that that's precisely why I wanted to be here today, because I think that we need to broaden the way that we think of things, and we need to be more considerate of how we do things. And as we sort of approach a new era of implementing engagement and getting into the community, I think it's really important that we think about things in a new way. And so while this presentation was specifically just on our Gov deliveries and how we kind of traverse that issue with the language specifically, I am here because we wanted some input, and your feedback has been great. I will take it back to my deputy director and let her know this is what I've heard. And my hope is not only just to take the feedback that I hear today, but if possible, to meet with you guys with some regularity. So that I can get some more insight and take it back to the team and say, we really need to think about this differently, and just broaden how we do this and how we consider engagement, because we're not as inclusive as we could be.
You are the first of the pods of the policy outreach and data units to reach out to us, and it's a new entity, a new concept in the county. But there are these policy outreach and data units, if you will, throughout Luge. And then I believe the other
Todd, do you want to
groups-
explain Luge? I know it's land use, but you.
Okay, throughout the land use and environment group, which is one of the 4 management groups of the county. So this is good to engage, and I know, Michelle, you mentioned that she hasn't reached out, or they haven't reached out or involved the disability community, but this is part of that.
Yeah.
And this is what this is why she, when she reached out to me, she wanted to speak to the committee in order to start doing that. Very good. Anything else for Holly? Or Holly, is there anything else that you have?
I don't at this time, but as I said, I would like to, I hope this kind of establishes a bit of a relationship with the pod here on at the Planning and Development Services. And I do hope that we can meet again and really start to dive into some of these issues and see how we can do better.
We will welcome that. I mean, this committee wants those partnerships. I'm also gonna just throw out the possibility of reaching out to community groups like the Blind Center and Braille Institute, that, are other forms that have to bring that in, or even the register of voters. I'm on the voter accessibility committee as well as the language access. Those are just some of those ways that might, spark some other thoughts.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I appreciate that, just giving me a starting point for where to start really looking at this in a different way. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
We do appreciate you coming.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Holly.
Okay, bye-bye.
Next on the agenda is the annual report of accessibility enhancements. And this is a follow-on to the board letter that was initiated not this past January, but the prior January from District 1 for the county to look across the county at areas to enhance accessibility awareness. And one of those items is to return to or report back to the board on accessibility related enhancements across the county that had been implemented in this fiscal year. So we're coming up to the end of the fiscal year, and we have been gathering a listing from a variety of different departments. Actually, I saw when I looked back at my email, there are some other departments that are putting in some enhancements right now. So public safety group is adding theirs in, land use and environment group, as well as health and human services and finance and general government groups have loaded in. We have about over 150 items, and I'll talk a bit to that. And then about 60 of those items really were in the past fiscal year. So, but more are coming in, so we'll be adding those and reporting out on those to the Board of Supervisors via a memo. But just to give you some idea, we had of those 60 that I've isolated, about 33 of them are through general services. So they're really true facilities activities. We have public works, which are so with facilities. Most of those are ADA enhancements. Anything that was done to restrooms, anything that might have been done to widen doors, etc.
Physical barriers.
Physical barriers, yes, for general services. Then from public works, a lion's share of those are sidewalk improvements. I'm sorry, also with general services, there would also be new facilities that were created or constructed. And then, of course, those were constructed per California Building Code, which includes ADA requirements there, as well as parking facilities, striping, parking, and then ramps, etc., and signage and parking facilities. So on with public works, I mentioned sidewalk improvements. There were 11 items that I had received in for public works. Again, sidewalk improvements, crosswalks, and then as well for traffic signals where there were new or renovations to traffic signals. There were audible pedestrian signals for
How many?
So let's see here. For traffic signals, we have traffic signals, accessible pedestrian signals, and pedestrian ramps. We had Spring Valley Shopping Center at Sweetwater Road and Gillespie Drive, Old Highway 395 in Rainbow Glen in Rainbow.
I guess my question is, are you
Three.
saying all three things were put in at each of these places?
In some cases, there were traffic signals and APS and pedestrian ramps, and then in other places, there were just traffic signals and APS.
I don't know what APS is.
Accessible pedestrian signals, the audible pedestrian.
Okay, that's what I'm specifically asking about. So that's not delineated that there were 16 places throughout the county?
It is, but it's in the details in the report.
Okay,
I won't be providing that level of detail in the report, but I can tell you that traffic signals, accessible pedestrian signals, and pedestrian ramps were provided in 3 different locations. That's what's been reported as it relates to traffic signals. For pedestrian ramps and sidewalks, there were 174 existing that were worked on, 151 new pedestrian ramps that were worked on. Lakeshore Drive, West Aviation Road, Ammunition Road, West Alvarado Street. Those were other projects that were done there, and then sidewalk panels were repaired and replaced at multiple locations in the unincorporated areas. So one of the things that I did want to get with this from this committee is what are some of the things that, or what's some of the structure that you'd like or you'd recommend for the report. One of the things is you don't want to have too much, but you also want to have enough level of detail. So I just wanted to give you some of the items there. In addition, see, another large area would have been, communications office. So we had, in the communications office, we established that you just saw that notice. So previously we had multiple notices, one for language, and then if you needed language in your language, this is the notice. If you need disability, accessibility, any accommodations, we had a notice for that. So we've consolidated those notices, streamlined them to make it easy, and then as well promoting. And this was one of the things that we had in the presentation and the recommendations to the board, was to have this be widespread, to make sure that there was consistency across the county departments, and working with communications and our office. We've now established this is the notice that needs to be in the communication. So that's being spread out throughout the county, because there are varying notices depending on the department. So to be more consistent, and then that helps people as well, because then they know what to expect. In addition to communication, there's closed captioning. We did get feedback that some of the videos that were on the web, one in particular was about parking at the county administration center, and there was no punctuation. So it was just an ongoing, and so we've now addressed, and we went through, well, the county communications team went through and looked at which videos are most used, and they've prioritized those videos to make sure that the captioning is more grammatically correct, as well as less overwhelming for someone who is reading and trying to figure out, wait, what does that all mean? Because it's all one sentence. Several closed captioning videos as well, American Sign Language, Mexican Sign Language. And when we say Mexican, that is Spanish, but with the Mexican idiom as opposed to Spain. So recognizing that we had those at COVID press conferences. Another thing that I want to say is we This is the first annual report. This is the first of any of this that we're doing. So it's the first annual report. So we're pulling in and going to use this as a baseline. And so there may be things that were done previously, but we want to inform, because a big part of what I found when I came in was a lack of knowledge. And I was talking earlier with Elaine about a lack of knowledge of what the county is doing already. So we want to inform the board, because several of the board members are new, relatively new, and they may not know what the county is doing already, as well as informing the community what the county is doing, and ourselves as well, for the Committee for Persons with Disabilities, to recognize what's already in place and what are some opportunities for additional enhancements. So I can go through just to give you an idea. You'll remember that we found in our survey, we found that there were certain departments that a significant number or percentage of the respondents in the survey, they claimed that they use services from those departments. Well, it warmed my heart to see that Assessor, Recorder, County Clerk offered several enhancements that they have put into place, and they were one of the departments that significant numbers use, as well as, of course, Health and Human Services, Library, et cetera. We knew that,
What did
and Parks and Recreation.
What did they put into place?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Okay, so Assessor, Recorder, County Clerk created space for wheelchair parking at marriage ceremony rooms. Translated ADA Title II public notice and provided it in Mandarin Chinese, which was an additional language that was not part of the threshold languages until that time period. Let's see, on-site telephonic, video, and written translation services.
What does that mean?
So that means if you come on site, you can request a translator, and in addition to American Sign Language. If you're talking on the phone, you can do the same. If you are in video website, and then as well written, you can get it. You can get it in your language.
What is it that you would get in your language? When I walk into the tax assessor's office, it's usually like paying something or asking a question.
So then if you need to have the communication, if you don't speak English, if you need to have the communication in your language, including American Sign Language, you can make that request.
Okay, I thought I heard you say something written, and that's what I was trying to understand.
You can also receive documents in your language as well.
I'm definitely seeing a theme
Around languages.
around languages,
That's
which
important,
is
though.
really actually impressive to me,
Yeah,
to see such a monumental effort and to see so many variations and innovative solutions. On the other side, I wonder why we haven't and hope we will do the same for disabilities, because I think the language reforms have far surpassed the disability reforms. And I wonder if we looked at funding, if we would find that the new language improvements are very well funded, and maybe.
I just wanna caution us on that, because I don't wanna get into a, there's more, like, people getting into, there's no prejudice against.
I wanna get into it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's okay to talk about funding, and I think it's okay to talk about the fact that there's a lack of funding in accessibility and innovative solutions for accessibility. I don't think there's anything wrong saying it. It's part of all of my policy conversations. If there isn't funding, it's a problem. So I would like to understand how we fund certain improvements. And I'd like to see how we fund or plan to fund our accessibility improvements as a county.
I just don't want it to get into a competitive thing, that's
I'm
all I'm
not-
saying.
I'm not competitive. I think language is, if somebody has a language barrier and a disability, that's a double disadvantage. So I think the language accessibility is extraordinary, and I think it can provide a wonderful model for us. And so, yeah, so, but just, I am curious, has this happened because we've funded it? And if so, how can we utilize that model for our accessibility work?
Which actually brings me to my recommendation for your report.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe it's a question about what you have planned thus far.
Yep.
And that is there any discussion about what are the areas for improvement, like in the year going forward? Because in my mind, that would help substantiate the need for funding, because like in my mind, every crosswalk should have the audible signal.
Yes.
Right? So
Not three of them.
yes, not three, but I don't know if those were the only three that didn't have it before and now they have it.
No, it's not, I can attest to that.
I believe, I agree, but because I was in my head going like, well, am I thinking about the city or am I thinking about the county? But either way, right, so then the question would be, of the crosswalks we have in the county, how many actually do have audibles, how many don't? And where can we go with that in the following year? What is the recommendation for that for the board? And my hope would be that would help them understand where funding is needed, because we don't have those things and we need them.
Well, and one of the things that, so in my prior life, I'm an industrial engineer. So I look at where's the best place to put, understanding. Many people think that there's unlimited funding, but I grew up in Kentucky and I grew up where there wasn't unlimited funding. So what I usually try to do is to determine where's the best place to put it. Where do we need audible pedestrian signals? Now, the way that actually, when there is a request, they put it in. It's a little difficult to anticipate where a sidewalk, who's gonna need a crosscuts. Those are standard when you're doing if you're doing any type of renovation, then that triggers an ADA requirement. So, but I'm taking notes here because we're talking about an intersection that does not have an audible pedestrian signal. And from my perspective, it's in an area that would have a high probability of having someone, because it's right outside of a live well center. So there'd be a higher probability that someone that might come for the live well center may have a disability than other intersections. So, but to your point, I don't know that that we have resources for every crosswalk to have audible pedestrian signals, but I definitely believe that where it makes sense, we should have.
Understandable. So maybe a priority list. And I think that that's a great point. Like if there's a county building, especially one that has to do with health, there should definitely be one, because that's like, but eventually every place should have one, because the reality is most people do not complain and do not make the request. They just suffer. And that's really not fair.
And when you say that they just ask for it, and that isn't my experience, that just because someone asks for it, that it happens.
It's usually
No,
multiple
okay.
people and then somebody
So
else
yes,
gets it.
I've had a lot of people call my office and ask for things. So no, it doesn't automatically just show up. But at least that triggers the recognition that there is a need for it there. So then there, other people who aren't in this room, make the decision, of what resources go into which location.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I've heard those crosswalks, right? Like, I'm pretty active, I try to go around the trolley when I can. And yeah, there are some areas obviously that haven't, you hear it, and I'm like, oh, and it just kind of makes sense, like, oh, it's probably really transited, right? But other, like where I live, San Ysidro, maybe not so many pedestrians or certain areas, it's just like, oh, obviously it wouldn't be there. Now, I'd be curious to know what the total cost is, because as far as installing it, I'm sure it's a huge undertaking as well as maintaining it, right?
Yeah.
And as you said, the city obviously doesn't have like unlimited resources, so just gauging, having a perspective or an idea of what the actual cost is, well, it would kind of make sense why it's not everywhere, right?
Well, I fortunately have dealt with APS, and I have heard
What is APS?
audible pedestrian signal.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Not
no problem.
adult protective services.
I know,
I've not dealt with, well, I've dealt with adult, but so for an audible pedestrian signal, I have heard $15,000 to put it in. So I don't know if that's on both sides of the street, because you have the chirp on one and you have the, I don't know how to describe it other than cuckoo on the other. There's a chirp and a cuckoo, and I don't know which way to go necessarily. I don't know how it would be to figure out that you're supposed to start walking. But yeah, so I've heard 15,000.
Expensive.
yeah, and he is talking just county, not the city, and
Yeah.
the city itself.
So, but great stuff. I will speak to budgeting, because there has been, and I thought that was where you were gonna go, there has been a request to look at from an equity standpoint, and to your point, Michelle, from an equity perspective, the part of it is budget equity, and to look at budgeting, how much of your budgeting is attributed to particular areas, especially areas that have been either underrepresented or underserved. I am collecting some estimates of cost. One of the challenges, and Lydia probably can speak to this better than I can, is one of the challenges when you're looking at from a project standpoint, your entire project is, let's call it $1 million. Well, a component of that is for blue stripes in the parking lot, and then a component is for white stripes in the parking lot, and yellow stripes and red stripes. So how do you break out the cost of the blue paint and the cost to stripe the blue versus, so it becomes a bit of a challenge and in isolating out. But if you are putting in an automatic door actuator, well, yes, that's easy to isolate out, but do you say 10% of the pavement of the parking lot pavement is due to, because you had 20 spaces, and 2 of them are ADA, so they use 10% of that. So there is a bit of a challenge on determining those types
Equity,
of,
yeah,
yeah.
equity and funding.
From a budgeting standpoint. But we are capturing some of that from a cost perspective, and I'm still working out how to present that and how to report that, because in some cases I'm getting numbers and in other cases we're not.
When is this report presented?
It's going to be just delivered as a memo. It's not going to be presented in a board meeting, but it will be delivered the fiscal year end, which is June 30th. So I've got I'm now going through and reconciling out information. making
Is
sure
there a
we don't have-
reason it's not being presented at a board meeting?
It was requested to be a report back as opposed to a return to the board.
Oh, I didn't know the difference in those words.
I didn't.
I now know, so I will start asking for return to the board.
Yeah, so I was, part of it was the October was a request to return to the board. And then the report back will be this annual report. Now, that being the case, that doesn't say that we won't be making a board letter and actually making a presentation at some point. Without getting into something that's off the agenda, I did want to propose as part of this discussion, because I don't want to present anything that's not on the agenda. But as part of this discussion for the committee to consider what type of return to the board or what type of board presentations the committee might be interested in doing at some point, whether it's, well, it'll probably be next fiscal year because June 30th is the end of this fiscal year. But to actually point that out. And then as well, to point out the fact that I know that our first survey, we wanted to get a baseline of what are the departments that our community is using, but there was a question about what is the satisfaction, the customer satisfaction of certain departments. And so I think that another, not to put work on the committee's doorstep, but another item that the committee can look at is what type of community engagement does the committee want to do another round of surveys or another round of community engagement to gather input from the community about accessibility. Again, not an item for discussion, but I wanted to plant that seed for the committee to consider.
So what, you want to say something about it? I was gonna ask, what are the, good, we're getting close on top. What is the last few items actually? Let's see. What are the last two items?
Housing, public safety,
Yes.
in the other order.
And that's for the committee to discuss what you want to, what are some activities that you want to take on as it relates to housing and as it relates to public safety.
Or if you,
Oh, don't get me started,
especially
especially on housing.
so, I mean, part of that is, so again, we could honestly, I mean, those were issues that we decided were priorities.
I thought we prioritized public safety and overall county accessibility. I didn't think housing made it into our strategic priorities this last round. Am I confused about that? I don't
That
recall.
may be accurate.
I mean, I'm open to indulging housing, but I would definitely like to, I mean, the reason why I asked for us to come back around with public safety was because we're doing amazing things, but I'd like to make sure that we're following up. Because we had that amazing meeting this summer, I thought she was an incredible, just such a class act. And I don't know how we're gonna continue. How will we know what's next? How will we know when the pictures on the blueprint are being adjusted? How will we know when they're doing an awareness campaign in the community about service animals, all those different things?
So on that, I can make a specific request, specifically her staff Yoli made a, you know, she could specifically make sure that we're informed.
How
And then
often
on
does the
those-
committee want to do a check-in?
You're talking about her coming back, or are you talking about what I heard you say was when they're doing these other things, that would be, that she would let us know.
Okay, so an ongoing basis?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that would make most sense because sometimes they're gonna have more progress than others. So maybe if they can just send something forward to update us that way.
Do we have any idea, or could we just put out there and start thinking about, do we have an idea of when reasonably we should begin to see some changes?
That's something I don't know.
I'm open, these are just some thoughts I have, I know we have a small group today, so maybe just put those questions out there and then we can digest and come back around.
I think that one thing in my mind that might be helpful is if maybe next meeting, we put this back on the agenda in some fashion for us to develop a list of specifically what items do we want her to report back on? Because asking her to report back on
So what have you been
everything might be
doing?
too much.
Yeah.
But if we're specific and say, we want to know about service animals, this and this, I think that makes it a lot easier for her to update us when those things happen.
I love that suggestion. What if we put on the agenda for the next meeting to go ahead and make a list of the things that we've done so far this year that we would like to stay connected to moving forward, and then we could break that down into the individual things.
I think that makes sense. I also think that it wouldn't be unreasonable, let's say, to even to check off that in 6 months after we had that conversation with the district attorney, that we would have a report back.
Yeah.
On those specific items, perhaps. And they can always say it's in progress, but that way, that this is what we've done so far, this is the next step.
Yeah, it's definitely in alignment with the work we were doing with the sheriff's office, because we brought some things to the sheriff's office and then they digested what we said. And then Summer did offer to put resources into creating like a checklist for how the average patrol officer could identify a person with a disability or a dependent adult. And so really, we can really tackle both public safety and work with the DA in one. I don't know if there's anything else we were working on.
Well, I don't know that it has to be something that we were working on, but some of our items of interest that our office might be doing.
Yeah, no, I just mean overall, so I know we did the sheriff's, I know we met with Summer Steph, and is there any?
Yeah, housing, we did do housing
Okay.
because it kept bringing
Okay,
up,
so,
and the blueprint was coming through.
Okay.
And honestly, so on the point of housing, I'm wondering, and my intention is not to be too controversial, but I know that the county is in the process of looking at buying properties to house the houseless population. And I was wondering if it might make sense for us to also provide some level of input about like what we see as being accessible for that, because one of the things I was hearing on the news was that the thought was like, well, some of these units already have kitchenettes and things, so nothing needs to be done to them, they're moving right.
Right,
Which is not necessarily realistic, or at least they need to make sure that a portion of that is literally not, I don't wanna say ADA accessible, because that's very general, and sometimes it's not appropriate. For instance, we recently traveled to my son's graduation, the hotel we stayed in, we asked for an ADA room. My husband had to have the bathroom door taken off the hinges so that he could roll into the bathroom. That was their ADA compliant room. So it might be ADA for someone,
right,
but not him, right?
and that's
So-
always based on like how wide is the wheelchair, right?
Mhm.
Because they're different.
And so maybe we really need to have a look taken at, are these rooms really gonna be as universally accessible as possible? Because how is it helping people if they still like are struggling to get into their bathroom, or they can't reach their doorknob?
it's a major problem with with people experiencing homelessness. A lot of people are experiencing homelessness because they cannot get the ADA or ADA for them, the right accommodation for them to be able to live integrated into the community. And that is both in homeless services, it's in shelters, it's in crisis centers, it's in mental health hospitals, it's in housing itself.
So I feel like that could tie into housing, as well as I also think it's a public safety issue.
Thank you.
So then I heard that to have a tracking of the items that the committee wants to keep a pulse check on. Would the committee want to send me the items? Committee members can send me the items that,
Well, some of them we just said, and I know that Jaime is taking notes on, right?
Yeah, can you guys, is there anything that we have been working on that you remember besides
Yeah.
public safety, DA and housing? And overall county accessibility?
On the housing, I also want to see whether any movement has been made in accessibility as opposed to just affordability. Or whether was in any way incorporated into it.
You know, as we move forward and we tackle some of our strategic priorities, there will be room to move into other strategic priorities, and I would like to see housing and homelessness stay on our radar.
And I guess another one was maybe following up with, I believe her name is Carolyn, the woman that does the government services. Legislation is what is happening with the Brown Act changes. And by the way, did Carolyn ever make it to the meeting on Zoom?
no, when I sent over to county council just to see, because her request didn't fall into one of the categories of a requested action.
Okay, but she still should have been able to get on the Zoom. Did she not have access to the Zoom link?
Everyone has access to the Zoom link.
Not me, unless you sent it to me.
Well, we knew you were coming.
I know, I'm just saying
In
in
person.
terms of access.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think
so
something about-
actually, I would disagree with that, and
I
I'd like to know
understand.
who in county council said that.
You already know it.
Because it very clearly says you don't need a specific reason for two,
Oh, two.
I believe it's two, I'll double check that, but I
I
believe
know
it's
for
two
sure at
of
least
them.
one.
And the third one is an emergency. So there isn't, for any reason you want,
That's not accurate, actually. For just cause, has 4 different items there, but
I really thought I heard one too, that was,
Yeah.
you just get a freebie,
well, you can not
attend.
attend.
Oh, but
Sure.
this is for a Zoom replacement? And I'm sorry, I'm so confused.
This is for a committee member to
Be on Zoom instead of in person.
participate, yes,
Thank you.
to participate via teleconference. Those are the,
but if the reason is she
emergency.
can't, whatever her reason is, that she can't make it.
Was she denied access to the meeting
So
or
that's
she
why
didn't make it? Okay.
That's why I was
I get it,
asking,
I get
did she have access to
Okay.
the link?
Okay, yes, I understand.
And I don't know.
so everyone has access to the link,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, hopefully she's okay. I'll reach out after the meeting.
What did she say the reason? For that?
That she wanted to multitask because she's working on her dissertation.
Again, I will check that, but I know that there's 3 other meetings that I've been attending. And it's been bottom line for 2 of those. If you can't make it and you want to access it on the computer, that's computer or whatever, is
Certainly.
fine, virtual, period. And the third one is an emergency, whatever that definition is. But that's why I kind of said, fine, whatever the reason is, it's
Yeah,
fine.
well, and so I knew that you were.
Rushing to
So I
try to
said-
get here.
I said, I'm sure it'll come up at the meeting, so that's
All right,
fine.
that's fine, but the bottom line is she did not get on. That's what my question was, yeah, and I'm sorry.
And if she had, I don't know how that is counted. I don't think it is counted as an appearance. I don't know. But I know that I did request input from county council because it's illegal.
Maybe, can we put that on the agenda for county council to come and explain it to us?
Yeah, so he came, I want Claudia Silva, and that's my request. Is that we have the head of county council, because the gentleman that came.
The nice lawyer gentleman. Yes, correct? He was a lawyer?
Yes,
Yes.
county council.
Yes,
He's a lawyer.
okay, county council.
Who
I don't know if
handles,
he's a nice lawyer, but.
who
he's a
handles
lawyer.
Brown Act?
I understand.
That is his specialty.
I understand, and he did say he was gonna come back at some point to let us know about the ADA accommodations if one of us was struggling because of their
Right,
disability.
and he did not do that.
No,
That's
no,
on the
no,
list.
no,
It's on the list.
The requesting an accommodation, you request that to the department.
Yeah.
And that department would be me.
Yeah.
I'm the ADA
Yeah.
Title II coordinator. So you can make a request for an accommodation. This was your request. Make a request for an accommodation based on your disability. And then we look at the disability and the request and make sure that they align up.
I just thought I heard him say that maybe the Department of Justice or somebody was looking at the ADA and the Brown Act. I don't know if it was the DOJ, but there was some higher authority that was kind of weighing in on this and.
Oh, well, that, yes,
Yeah,
as far
I
as
did
that,
think
I
that
thought
you
you
said
were
that.
asking, a request for accommodation, request. for-
But he was gonna get back to us about that, that's what I understood also.
Yes.
So what he's saying is her request was not a request for disability accommodation.
Well, he didn't, that.
Well, she
She didn't
didn't
write-
make a request.
she didn't
for-
write
She didn't make a
something.
request for
Right.
a accommodation.
Okay.
Official.
I'm gonna leave it alone.
Okay, Ricky, maybe
We're all a
you
little
need
low
to do that.
invited of me.
But we're getting to the end of our time, so I wanna, I think the last, it was kind of, we can continue that discussion, on the next
Yeah.
meeting, but I do think that it is good for us to start keeping tracking of this.
Yeah.
And I did, remember asking for Claudia Silver specifically to address that.
And she did respond that she could not make that,
That,
but
I
that she
know,
was going to provide you with an expert.
I know, and I'm asking
who
for
is what
her
she
to come, so
provided.
that we set a time for her to come. Because we were clearly not satisfied
Well,
with
Or
his.
just
I
at least not-
understand that.
Yes, or at least just still maybe could use additional clarification.
No, I'm
She
asking for her to come.
she basically has said that she will tell you what Randall will tell you.
Okay, I'm asking for her to come, let her turn us down.
She has.
asking
She has, she
Todd,
has,
I will write that then to the supervisors that we requested specifically
Mhm.
for Claudia Silver,
yes,
the head of county council,
yes.
to come and speak with us.
Mhm.
Let her turn that down so that I can forward that to the other offices.
Well, she didn't
I'm
turn it
just-
down. She
And I'm
informed
asking
you
it
that she
again
was
for
gonna
next meeting.
provide you with
Todd,
someone that's better. than she is.
he's not better. We are not happy with his answers,
Right. Of course.
especially when he tried to tell us that we couldn't hold a meeting if we didn't have quorum, which is
Did she
blatant.
talk to you after that?
No,
Because she was going to, okay, all right.
so I am asking again
Mhm.
that she come and see us.
And speak to you about Brown Act and telecom.
Come and speak with us. Period.
All right. And the topic?
I could add a topic. I
Sure.
would really like to understand the county's responsibility in making sure that the projects, organizations, et cetera, that they fund are compliant with the ADA, not just physical barriers, but also effective communication.
Programs that they fund, now that is
I'll give an
internal as
example,
well as
like-
contracted?
I mean,
Yes.
yes, thank you. I still need to understand a little bit more about infrastructure, but what I've come across is the more advanced I get in my advocacy, I'm coming across county funded programs that are not compliant in the ADA and are not trying to be compliant.
Right.
And I would like to understand what the county's responsibility in that is. If the county funds a program, do they have any responsibility in making sure that that program is ADA compliant?
And it's an outside contractor doing it.
So if it's an
Like any of
outside
the mental
contractor,
health contractors, like Exodus Recovery is a perfect example. They have a carte blanche, no service dog policy. They run all the MCRT and crisis centers. they won't-
give me that
Yeah, that's the Exodus Recovery,
Exodus.
and they are one of our largest contractors for mental health
It's
services.
a third party contractor.
Sure.
And I can name a bunch of them as well.
Yeah.
Well, if you all would like, because that's more helpful than,
Okay, but I am still asking just for her to come.
sure, of course. And she'd like to know what she should prepare.
Brown Act,
Okay,
the nonsense that you can't hold a meeting if you don't have quorum. That honestly, I don't trust anything he's gonna say. So he should not be our liaison.
I'm also concerned about the fact that if somebody's on a limited income, they are, at a disadvantage for being, on a board, committee, or commission because we are not reimbursed for gas expenses or travel expenses. And so for somebody like me who's on an extremely below extreme poverty level, this is something that is financially cumbersome to me, and that would be for anybody in my financial situation. And I don't think our boards, committees, and commissions should only be for people that can afford to pay for their participation.
in order to make meetings.
Yeah.
And I will say that that is something I've heard from other community members, especially among people who are underserved groups,
Right.
that they feel like the county doesn't want them to participate because it is cumbersome to get to the meeting or be at meetings at the times that they're offered. And I'm not talking necessarily about this committee, but many of the boards and committees.
I also, okay, so I wanna make sure I say something before we end. Is this our, that's our last topic, right?
Agenda?
Agenda.
Are we finished with the agenda?
I don't know, that's my question.
I think we're done, right?
Yeah, yeah, yes.
I mean, I was depending on you to tell me the
Oh.
agenda. Every time I've asked, I've been looking at you.
Because they
Because,
was keeping such good track of it, I thought, okay.
see, we've been spoiled, we had Katie always did that, Jaime. Yeah, she would have been on it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so because I do, well, at the very end, I think we had topics in progress. I do wanna bring up that this is really burdensome. I didn't really realize it, and I just said, okay, for the fourth Wednesday of the month. But I am, obviously we're not voting on anything today. But I just wanna bring up revisiting the timing. I'm probably fine on any other Wednesday. But the fourth Wednesday in particular, I've been on Zoom meetings since 9 o'clock this morning. And then there's an added just for me, because I've got a convention that we're leaving at like 5 in the morning tomorrow.
I'm not sure if it's the same for other people or if today's just one of those days, but.
No, we knew that Kate, and it was this particular day.
Yeah, well, I'm open.
Kate wasn't gonna be there and Jeanette had a previous engagement. I don't know about Carolyn and I don't know about Candy because I called on both of them. Is, who are you saying thank you to?
You, for all the work
Oh,
you've done.
I thought somebody was behind me.
No, thank you, Michelle, for calling everybody and checking in with us and always checking in with me to make sure that I know that we have our meeting. And yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you. So are you okay on any other Wednesday? I mean, I don't know if Wednesdays are good or clearly there was a stress on Friday.
I'm open. I really am.
Wednesdays are fine for me.
Any
Wednesdays
other
and
day.
Fridays are, any other day I'm honestly pretty busy with work, but Wednesdays and Fridays are
Usually
pretty lax.
relax. And Regina, your Wednesdays are good, the other Wednesdays?
I'm good.
I was waiting for her to talk.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you're too low. What kind of teacher are you? Teachers have loud voices.
It's been a
Or
long, it was a
stereotype.
long morning, so I
Okay,
used up all my adrenaline earlier too.
and I just wanted to bring that up, and obviously I'll bring it up to Kay and Jeanette. I don't remember if there was a reason we picked the fourth, but that's just because I have a meeting following this, so it's just. And you guys? You're here anyway. Hyman, Elaine.
Yeah.
Todd,
Yeah, whatever works for the committee.
but in terms of the other Wednesdays, is there any
We
specific?
can be, no, we can be available.
I just, again, I don't care about Wednesday, but I just wondered.
Whatever day works. If Thursday's best, Friday's best, whatever.
Yeah, I didn't want Friday because of traffic.
I was all ready to practice my microphone skills.
Oh, the
When I
other
watched
room?
my first one, it's so extreme, I'm like,
We will be in this room next month as well, and then the month after will be down in 302. Unless we change the
Switch a
date,
date,
and
which is
then,
what I'm hoping will happen next month. So we'll have that back on the agenda. And I would like to talk,
oh, Todd, thank you.
what did he give you?
I asked for some ADA paper format copy materials and Todd helped procure them for me.
Oh, cool. I also would like to pursue, and I believe you brought the paper one, so I can't remember, but about getting the badges, cause it really would
get you
have
another, sure.
made it faster for me coming up when I was late, which I don't intend to be, but.
I had a couple good experiences here with the security guard and I was feeling all confident. I went to the courthouse last week to pull some records and oh man, I got a brutal, not ADA compliant whatever with the guard and support services, and it turned into a whole thing. And you know, I asked to speak to the lieutenant and the lieutenant said, oh wait, you're not the girl this happened to last month? It was just like you, the same story. And he's like, oh wait, no, she had a different dog. And he's the third lieutenant I've worked with, and he's gonna be there for a year. So he seems pretty committed to making sure the training retains. But not just in that conversation with him, but in other conversations I've had with law enforcement, including the sheriffs, they've expressed that when there's somebody in a position and advocacy happens and they get something started, it's very hard to keep it going over the years, you know, and that's just something for us to think about in the future of how we want to make recommendations with law enforcement or how often we want to make recommendations. So obviously they're going to go through training again, but
So then that means they didn't make it an institutional practice.
they actually had the wrong, so they actually showed me the policy, and the policy was actually in like an ADA policy, and the first question was, is this a pet? So they're gonna change that to the 2 ADA questions, which is this animal required because of a disability, and what task or services the animal perform? But the poor guard, who I accused of discriminating against me, who in retrospect was not a bad person, he was trying to soften the blow of telling me I couldn't have my dog. But he was actually trained to go through the pet part of the conversation. And so, you know, they're making those improvements. But no, it's every 2 years for ADA training.
But again, I say, that means that it's not an institutional practice. Because if the training is institutional, And that means no matter what, no matter who changes, except for when it comes to updating things, everyone should have the same practice and should understand what to do. So I feel like that's kind of concern.
Well, perhaps we could go into that a little bit more and you could share your insight on that in our next conversation about public safety. Yeah. I hope I don't forget, but I would like to understand what you mean by that. Cause like if the policy is every 2 years, how is that different? Cause I think you're describing something maybe more cultural.
Well, because if a policy is a,
we,
you
Oh,
know,
I'm sorry.
Did you want to,
My bad.
Michelle, did you want to adjourn the meeting?
Yes,
Oh, yes,
sorry, for next time.
I will officially bring this meeting to a close. We will unfortunately be meeting on June, the fourth Wednesday in June, and then reconsider our meeting time.
We'll have it on the agenda.
I'll put it on on the agenda as well as continuing any tracking of people that come across situations that are making it hard to access civil discourse. Like their choice.
Do we all wanna add this into our pulsing, as you called it, Todd? Is that kind of,
Pulsing
you
is,
said keeping a pulse on, or
yeah,
how did you, what was
Yeah,
that?
and then
I
we
like
can, if it's outside of the county, as Michael mentioned, we can channel, put together what, one of the things that I would, and we can stop the recording.
recording.
I mean,
Thank you.
but